The dining room at Loroni hummed with the particular frequency of old money and new arrogance, a low murmur of privilege, punctuated by the crystalline clink of Bordeaux against hand-blown stemware. Sarah Elizabeth Bennett moved through this landscape of excess like a ghost in black and white, her server's uniform a study in invisibility. The fabric had gone soft from too many wash cycles, clinging to her shoulders with the weight of 11 hours on her feet and 3 years of accumulated exhaustion. 8:47 p.m. 13 minutes until she could catch the A train home to Brooklyn. 38 minutes until she'd climb 4 flights to her father's medication schedule. But first, table 7. The restaurant's interior was a hymn to Parisian nostalgia. Cream-colored walls adorned with gilt mirrors that had supposedly hung in Versailles, marble floors that echoed every humiliation in haute acoustics, and chandeliers that cast everything in a golden light that felt less like warmth and more like judgment. The air itself was layered, top notes of seared duck and black truffle, middle notes of perfume that cost more per ounce than Sarah's hourly wage, and underneath it all, the faint metallic scent of anxiety that every service worker knew by heart. Sarah approached table 7 with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd learned to make herself small. Harrison Sterling III sat sprawled in his chair like a man who'd never been told no and wouldn't recognize the word if he heard it. Mid-30s, with the kind of handsomeness that came from good genes and better dermatologist, he wore a suit that whispered Brioni and screamed insecurity. Across from him, Veronica Ashford, a model whose face Sarah recognized from subway advertisements, picked at her appetizer with the enthusiasm of someone already planning her exit strategy. Just take the order, Sarah told herself, her mind a cathedral of exhaustion and discipline. Smile, nod, survive. But survival, Sarah had learned, was sometimes indistinguishable from dying slowly. Harrison snapped his fingers, an actual snap, like summoning a dog. And Sarah felt something ancient and professorial stir in her chest. The gesture was so casually cruel, so reflexively dismissive, that for a moment she forgot she was supposed to be invisible. She forgot the medical bills stacked on her kitchen counter like a Jenga tower of despair. She forgot that she needed this job the way lungs need air. "Garçon!" Harrison announced, his voice pitched to Carrie. Already wrong, she wasn't male, and the term itself was outdated even in actual France. But he was performing now, playing to an audience of his own ego. What followed was linguistic massacre. Harrison launched into what he clearly believed was French, ordering coq au vin avec des légumes de saison, with an accent that would make a Google Translate bot weep. He pronounced it coq au vin with a hard American K, then butchered légumes into something that sounded like légumes. Each syllable was a small violence against the language of Molière, Voltaire, and every medieval scribe whose manuscripts Sarah had once read by the pale light of the Sorbonne archives. She watched him perform, watched Veronica's uncomfortable smile, watched the sommelier 2 tables over actually wince, and then Harrison's eyes locked on Sarah's face. On the microscopic flicker she couldn't quite suppress, the tiny compression of her lips that came from 3 years of swallowing her own brilliance. He leaned back, a predator sensing weakness. Did you understand that, or should I repeat it slower? The emphasis on that last word was a scalpel, designed to cut. He switched gears, adding phrases in worse French. Tu es stupide, non? You're stupid, right? The words hung in the air between them. Sarah felt them land. Not on her skin, but somewhere deeper. In the place where Dr. Thomas Bennett's daughter still lived, where the scholar who'd published 3 groundbreaking papers before age 25 still breathed, where the woman who could identify regional French dialects by ear hadn't been completely murdered by medical debt and survival mode. Something in Sarah's spine straightened. Not defiance, not yet, just the faint memory of dignity. She responded in Parisian French, the kind that came from years of immersion, from reading Chrétien de Troyes in original manuscript, from coffee-stained afternoons, debating the subjunctive with professors who'd forgotten more than most people ever learned. Monsieur, je comprends parfaitement votre commande. Bien que votre accent suggère que vous avez appris le français auprès d'un GPS cassé. Permettez-moi de vous recommander le coq au vin. C'est difficile à ruiner, même avec une prononciation aussi creative. The words emerged polished and precise, each syllable a small rebellion. Translation for those following along. Sir, I understand your order perfectly, though your accent suggests you learned French from a broken GPS. Allow me to recommend the coq au vin. It's hard to ruin, even with such creative pronunciation. The silence that followed had texture, weight. You could have cut it with the butter knives on table 4. Then the laughter started, scattered at first, then spreading like wildfire through the wealthy and well-educated diners, who actually knew French when they heard it. The woman at table 4 whispered to her husband in rapid-fire French, Elle l'a détruite. She destroyed him. The sommelier turned away, shoulders shaking. Even Veronica covered her mouth, her eyes wide with something between horror and delight. Harrison's face cycled through colors Sarah didn't know existed outside of medical charts. White to pink to crimson to a particular shade of rage purple. He stood so abruptly his chair scraped against marble with a sound like bones breaking. How dare you? But across the room, at table 12, something more important was happening. An older gentleman, silver-haired, immaculately dressed, with the bearing of someone who'd commanded boardrooms and conquered markets, lowered his wine glass. Lucien Valmont had been watching the entire exchange with the attention of a master appraiser evaluating a hidden masterpiece. His eyes weren't on Harrison, they were on Sarah. And in them, she saw something that terrified her more than Harrison's rage: recognition. Harrison was still shouting, but Sarah barely heard him. She was too busy watching Lucien Valmont's expression shift from curiosity to calculation to something that looked almost like remembrance. Then Harrison's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. My card, my black Amex, it's gone. He wheeled on Sarah, pointing with the theatrical precision of a man who'd found his angle. She was the only one close enough to take it. The maitre d' materialized from nowhere, his face professionally neutral but his eyes apologetic. Miss Bennett, I'm going to need you to come with me to the office. Now. Sarah's world tilted on its axis. 38 minutes until her father's medication. $847,000 in medical debt, one false accusation away from losing everything. She followed Gerard toward the back office, her legs moving on autopilot, her mind already calculating which bill she'd have to default on first, which creditor she could stall longest, how many shifts she'd need to pick up to compensate for being fired from thud. The sound of a wine glass being set down with intention. Sarah glanced back. Lucien Valmont was standing, his napkin placed carefully beside his plate. Their eyes met across the dining room, and in that moment, Sarah understood something fundamental had shifted. She just didn't know whether she'd been saved or condemned. The back office of Loreny smelled like old receipts and broken dreams. Gerard, the maitre d' who'd served Sarah coffee on her first day 2 years ago, who knew her father was sick even if he didn't know the details, gestured to the chair with genuine regret in his eyes. Your pockets, please, Sarah. She complied with the mechanical precision of someone who'd stopped expecting fairness from the universe. Crumpled subway ticket, cherry lip balm from the bodega on Bedford Avenue. A photograph, creased and fading, of her father at Columbia, mid-lecture, alive in ways that stroke had stolen. No credit card, no evidence of the crime she hadn't committed. Gerard checked her purse with apologetic efficiency. Wallet with $23, keys. Pepper spray she'd never needed until maybe tonight. Still nothing. The door slammed open. Harrison Sterling stormed in like a man whose humiliation required an audience, Veronica trailing behind him with increasing reluctance. Check the cameras. Harrison's voice had the sharp edges of wounded ego. She probably passed it to someone in the kitchen. That's how they operate. They. Sarah heard the word land. Service workers. Poor people. The invisible class that men like Harrison moved through. Like furniture. Gerard pulled up the security footage on a monitor that had seen better decades. Timestamps scrolled. Sarah watched herself on screen, approaching table 7, taking orders, delivering appetizers. At no point did her hands come near Harrison's jacket draped over his chair. Check every angle, Harrison demanded, his certainty wavering but his cruelty compensating. Earlier footage. She must have... Harrison. Veronica's voice was quiet. Maybe you just misplaced... I don't lose things, Veronica. Sarah checked her watch. 9:28 p.m. The medication window was closing. Her father's seizure cycle was precarious, missed the timing, and the whole neurological balance her doctors had fought 3 years to establish could destabilize. She could see it playing out. The ambulance, the ER, another $15,000 bill she couldn't pay. I need to call someone, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. To check on my father, please. Harrison's laugh was an ugly thing. Your father? You think I care about your family drama? You're not leaving until we find the door opened. Lucien Valmont entered the cramped office like dignity incarnate, his presence immediately recalibrating the room's power dynamics. He was tall, silver-haired, with eyes that had seen through corporate deceptions and human pretense for 40 years. Gerard, he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd never needed to shout. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. He placed a black credit card on the desk. Amex Centurion, Harrison W. Sterling, III, embossed in silver. You dropped this by your table, Mr. Sterling. I found it on the floor near your chair when I reached for my napkin. The silence had physics. Sarah watched Harrison's face perform calculations. Denial, spin. Retreat. Someone must have knocked it there when, The cameras, Mr. Sterling. Lucien's interruption was surgical. They will show me picking it up from beneath your chair. They will not show Miss Bennet anywhere near it. He paused, letting the implication breathe. Would you like Gerard to continue reviewing footage? Or shall we all acknowledge what actually happened? Here? Veronica was already backing toward the door. I need to call a car, separately. She left, her heels a staccato judgment. Gerard nodded to Sarah. You're free to go, Miss Bennet. Take tomorrow off, paid. Sarah gathered her things with shaking hands, relief and fury braiding together in her chest. But before she could escape, Lucien spoke again. Miss Bennet, a moment. She turned. He was studying her with unsettling precision. You're French. Where did you study? Sarah hesitated. The truth felt dangerous, but lying felt worse. The Sorbonne, a lifetime ago. Lucien's expression shifted, recognition blooming into something deliberate. Not just the Sorbonne. Your accent carries the precision of someone who's read Chrétien de Troyes in original manuscripts. Sarah's heart stopped. How could he possibly... I know, Lucien continued, because my son is a literature professor. He's mentioned precisely one student who possessed that level of linguistic archaeology. He paused. A Miss Sarah Bennet. 4 flights of stairs had never felt longer. Sarah's feet screamed inside shoes worn smooth at the heels. Each step a small negotiation between exhaustion and necessity. 3 deadbolts, top, middle, bottom. A ritual of urban survival she could perform half-conscious. The apartment that greeted her was a different universe from Lorigny's gilt mirrors in Versailles, chandeliers, bed-stuy authenticity, cramped one-bedroom with walls thin enough to hear the Johnsons arguing upstairs, radiator that clanged like church bells at 3 a.m., and every available surface colonized by books she couldn't afford shelves for. Medical equipment dominated the living room, a hospital bed, oxygen monitor, the wheelchair that had become her father's throne. Maria, the evening aide, was reading to Thomas Bennet from a worn copy of The Sun Also Rising. He sat in his wheelchair by the window, a man of 68 who looked 80, hollowed by 3 years of illness, but with eyes still sharp as scalpels. When he saw Sarah, his face transformed. That smile, broken but genuine, was worth every humiliation at Lorigny. Sarah paid Maria in cash, always cash, then sank into the chair beside her father. She told him about her night, carefully editing the terror and false accusation, amplifying the linguistic victory. I destroyed a billionaire in a linguistic ambush, Dad. She managed to laugh. You would have been proud. Thomas pointed to the stack of books on the floor. Medieval poetry, linguistic theory, her own published papers she couldn't bear to throw away. His question was clear even without words. Sarah nodded. I used my French, all of it. His hand trembled as he raised it, fighting aphasia and 3 years of neurological damage. 3 words emerged, each one a battlefield one. You never forgot. Then a 4th, his voice cracking with effort. Fly. The same word he'd said 6 years ago when she left for Paris. Fly, Sarah. Fly while you can. She looked around the apartment, their fortress of survival. Medical bills in neat stacks on the kitchen counter, organized by urgency and impossibility. The folder marked Mount Sinai Outstanding sat there like an accusation. $847,394.16. A number that grew faster than her wages, a mountain she climbed while it grew taller beneath her feet. On the wall hung a photograph. Sarah at the Sorbonne in academic robes, holding her master's thesis, glowing with the particular joy of someone who'd found their purpose. That was 4 years ago. A different woman, a different life. Thomas tapped the photo, then pointed to the Valmont business card Sarah had placed on the table beside her keys. His message needed no words. Go back. Dad, I can't. Sarah's voice fractured. What if I've forgotten everything? What if I fail? What if... His hand silenced her, shaking but determined. You never forgot. Then, fly. Her laptop pinged, an email notification that would change everything. From avalmont@valmontfoundation.org. Subject, the Bennet Papers. Sarah's breath caught. She opened it with hands that had forgotten how to be steady. Miss Bennet, my father mentioned meeting you tonight. I'm writing to confirm that the position he offered is legitimate and desperately needed. We've acquired 14th century French manuscripts requiring immediate authentication. No one in our current team can read court French from the Valois period. But I remember someone who could read it as easily as a grocery list. If you're still that person, please consider this opportunity. If you've moved on from that life, I understand, but I hope you haven't. The world needs more people who see poetry where others see footnotes. Regards, Adrien Valmont. Adrien, the visiting professor from that Sorbonne symposium. The man who'd called her paper on Christine de Pizan the most alive scholarship he'd read in a decade. She'd blushed, stammered something forgettable. but she'd never forgotten him. Sarah looked at her father, at the bills, at the books representing the life she'd abandoned, at the email from a man who still believed she was capable of brilliance. She typed, "Mr. Valmont, I'll need 1 week to arrange care for my father. If the offer still stands, I accept. Sarah Bennett." Her finger hovered over send. Thomas nodded. She pressed it. 3 blocks away, in a penthouse that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, Harrison Sterling threw a crystal glass against imported marble. Veronica had left him. Laurani refused to comp his meal. And worst of all, that waitress had made him look like a fool. He opened his laptop, searched Sarah Bennett plus Sorbonne, dozens of results, academic papers, symposium mentions, scholarship awards. The waitress was a scholar, a genius. His rage crystallized into something sharper, obsession. He'd destroy her, properly this time. The private elevator to the 47th floor moved so smoothly Sarah wondered if she'd actually left the ground. 8 days had passed since Laurani. 8 days of arranging her father's care, researching the Valmont Foundation, and trying to convince herself this wasn't an elaborate dream that would evaporate when her alarm clock dragged her back to reality. The doors opened onto a vision that made Laurani look like a pretender. The Valmont Foundation archive stretched before her like a cathedral built for knowledge instead of God. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls housed temperature-controlled chambers filled with manuscripts, scrolls, and books that predated America itself. Natural light filtered through precisely calculated angles, illuminating centuries without damaging them. The air itself felt different here, controlled, preserved, expensive in ways that had nothing to do with money. Dr. Bennett, or is it Miss? Sarah turned. A woman in her 30s, black hair pulled into efficient precision, extended her hand. Chen Wei, head archivist. And before you correct me, I saw your publications. You earned the title, even if you didn't finish the paperwork. Sarah winced. Just Sarah. Chen's smile was knowing. Just Sarah who can read extinct languages. We'll get along fine. The workspace Chen showed her overlooked Central Park, autumn turning the trees into a manuscript of gold and crimson. The desk looked like it cost more than Sarah's annual rent at Laurani, a computer with museum-grade software. And on the desk, a note, an elegant script. "Welcome home, Miss Bennett. My son regrets he cannot be here to greet you. He's in Paris until March. But he asked me to tell you that your old desk at the Sorbonne has been gathering dust for 3 years. Perhaps it's time to stop punishing yourself for loving your father." LV. Sarah's throat tightened. How did Lucien Valmont see through her so clearly? Ready for the real work? Chin led her to a climate-controlled vault. Inside, 47 manuscript fragments rested in archival boxes like sleeping histories. British Museum loan, 14th century, all French, all requiring authentication and translation. 6 months. Can you do it? Sarah lifted the first fragment. The parchment was velvet soft, 700 years old, covered in script. Most modern scholars would need dictionaries to parse. She read it as easily as breathing. En ces temps de douleur, la dame écrivait. In this time of sorrow, the lady wrote. She looked up. I can do it in 3. Lunch, in the Foundation's cafe, introduced her to Marcus Chen, no relation to Chen Wei, a 21-year-old NYU intern drowning in student loans in a digital catalog system that kept crashing. Sarah glanced at his screen. Wrong encoding for medieval script. Try Unicode block E000. Marcus stared. How do you... Just try it. The system ran perfectly. Marcus looked at her like she'd performed miracles. Later, exploring the restricted archives, Sarah found a section labeled Valmont Personal, Family Holdings. She shouldn't look, but curiosity won. Inside, photographs. One stopped her heart. Adrienne Valmont, at 25, standing before the Sorbonne, holding a book, her published master's thesis. In the margin, handwritten, "The Bennett girl he never stops talking about." Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, heavy breathing. Then, "You think you can embarrass me and walk away? I know where you work now. I know who hired you, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what a fraud you are." Click. Sarah's hands shook. Chen noticed. You okay? Fine, just an old ghost. But ghosts, Sarah knew, didn't make phone calls. Harrison Sterling was very much alive. And hunting. 6 weeks blurred together in a rhythm Sarah had forgotten existed. The rhythm of purpose instead of survival. October bled into November. The manuscripts yielded their secrets to her, like old friends remembering a shared language. She discovered a misattributed fragment, 14 lines that scholars had dismissed as amateur poetry, was actually an unknown work by Christine de Pizan, a lost feminist treatise 700 years old, written by a woman who'd survived widowhood and poverty by selling her mind when the world preferred women. Silent, the discovery made international headlines in academic circles. Lost to Pizan work authenticated by Valmont Foundation. Sarah's name appeared in the Journal of Medieval Studies. Lucian beamed. Chen called her the Archive Whisperer. But while Sarah built her professional resurrection, Harrison Sterling built something darker. Anonymous emails arrived at the Valmont Foundation board. Questions regarding Dr. Bennett's credentials. A nasty blog post appeared on Academic Whispers. From genius to waitress, what's the real story? Photos of her leaving Lorne 3 years ago, captioned with insinuation. Sarah didn't respond publicly, but the stress carved itself into her sleep, her appetite, the way her hands shook when her phone buzzed with unknown numbers. The Marcus subplot provided occasional light. She'd been secretly helping him, reviewing his papers, connecting him with resources. When his tuition bill came due, Sarah created a phantom scholarship, the Valmont Foundation Merit Award. She had Chen presented officially, $12,000 Sarah paid from her first salary. Marcus cried when he received it. I was going to quit. I couldn't tell my family I was failing. Sarah squeezed his shoulder. You're not failing. You're being failed by a system that prices out brilliance. There's a difference. Then her father's health collapsed. A small stroke. Recoverable, the doctor said, but terrifying. Sarah sat beside his hospital bed at Mount Sinai, holding his hand while monitors beeped their mechanical reassurance. Thomas managed one word through the aphasia. Fight. She didn't know if he meant the disease or Harrison. Maybe both. Lucien Valmont appeared in her office the next day with a folder. I've been made aware of certain attacks on your reputation. He slid it across her desk. Inside, every email, every Planet article, every anonymous complaint, all traced back to Harrison Sterling. I don't tolerate bullies, Lucien said quietly. And I protect my people. Whatever you need. Well, why? Sarah's voice cracked. Why are you doing this for me? Lucien's expression softened. Because my son would never forgive me if I let you be destroyed twice. Strange help arrived from unexpected sources. Encrypted emails appeared in her inbox, screen caps of Harrison's financial troubles, evidence of shell companies, proof his empire was hemorrhaging money. The sender, friend in shadows at proton.com. Sarah didn't know who was helping her, but someone was watching her back. Then came the violation. Working late, 8 p.m., archive supposedly empty. Sarah heard footsteps. She peered around a bookshelf. A man in black photographing restricted documents. She recognized him, one of Harrison's associates. She pulled out her phone. The man turned, saw her, ran. Sarah chased but lost him in the stairwell. Morning revealed the damage. The Valmont personal holdings had been accessed. One item missing. A family registry listing all Valmont properties and holdings. Lucien was furious. This was targeted. What was he after? Sarah's blood ran cold. Maybe destroying your family's reputation too. Revenge for defending me. That night, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text message with a photo attached. Her father. Being wheeled into Mount Sinai for therapy. Clearly photographed from close range. The message, you cost me everything, now I'll cost you everything. Harrison was watching her father. The fortress had been breached. The police precinct in Midtown smelled like burned coffee and bureaucratic apathy. Sarah sat across from Detective Ramirez, showing him the photo of her father, the threatening text, 6 weeks of documented harassment. Ramirez sighed with the weariness of someone who'd seen too much and could do too little. Miss Bennett, I understand your concern, but this isn't technically a threat. It's a photo taken in a public place, no explicit violence mentioned. He's stalking my disabled father. Can you prove intent to harm? Anything concrete? Sarah left with nothing but a case number and the bitter knowledge that the law protected men like Harrison better than it protected people like her father. She hired private security, 2 rotating guards, $800 a week she could barely afford. Thomas didn't understand why strangers suddenly shadowed him to therapy. Careful, he managed to say, his face creased with worry. She lied. Just a precaution, Dad. Then Harrison made his boldest move yet. Lucien called Sarah into his office, his expression darker than she'd ever seen. Harrison Sterling has donated $5 million to our new wing. It comes with conditions, a board seat, and oversight of archival acquisitions. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs. You refused? Of course I refused. He threatened to pull the donation and sue for defamation, claims I slandered him at Lorne. The board is pressuring me to accept. The moral calculus was brutal. If Lucien refused, 12 staff members could lose their jobs. Chenwei, Marcus. The scholarship program Sarah had secretly funded. This is because of me, Sarah said. This is because of him. Lucien's voice was iron. But I need you to know, whatever you decide to do next, I support you. Sarah could quit. Make Harrison's problem disappear. Or she could fight. She chose research. For 2 weeks, Sarah applied her academic skills to a different kind of manuscript. Harrison Sterling's past. Property records. Court filings. Business registrations. Shell companies hidden within shell companies. She excavated his history the way she'd excavated lost poems, methodically, relentlessly. The pattern emerged. Harrison's fortune was a house of cards. He'd been using fraudulent structures to hide assets during his divorce. He'd committed crimes the authorities hadn't noticed, because men like Harrison existed in a different legal atmosphere. Then came the meeting that changed everything. Bryant Park, 3 p.m. December wind cut through Sarah's coat as she waited at the fountain. The email from Friend in Shadows had been clear. Meet me. I have what you need. Veronica Ashford appeared, looking nothing like the uncomfortable model from Loreny. She wore jeans, minimal makeup, and carried a messenger bag like battle gear. He did the same thing to my sister, Veronica said without preamble. Accused her of stealing when she rejected his advances. She lost her job. Couldn't find another. Harrison made calls. She's a bartender now. Has a master's degree in economics. And Veronica pulled a laptop from her bag. I have emails, texts, proof of his pattern. But I was too scared to come forward alone. Sarah looked at the evidence. Years of it, meticulously documented. Why now? Because watching him destroy you made me realize silence is collaboration. I won't be his accomplice anymore. That evening, Marcus appeared at Sarah's office door, his expression caught between gratitude and betrayal. The scholarship wasn't real, was it? I checked the foundation records. There's no such program. Sarah's cover evaporated. No, it wasn't real. Why? His voice cracked. Why did you do it? Because someone should have done it for me. Because you deserved a chance. Because the system that forces brilliant people to quit is broken, and I had the power to fix one small piece of it. Marcus hugged her, tears soaking her shoulder. I'll pay you back. Every cent. No, pay it forward. Help someone else someday. Her email pinged. From adrian.valmont@sorbonne.fr. Sarah, my father tells me you've been under siege. I'm cutting my fellowship short. I'll be in New York by December 20th. If you're who I remember, you won't need my help. But I want you to know you have it anyway. You once told me that Christine de Pizan survived by writing her way out of poverty. You're doing the same thing. I've always admired that. A. And Sarah sat surrounded by evidence, manuscripts, and impossible choices. She could expose Harrison, but drag the Valmont Foundation through scandal. She could stay silent, but Harrison wouldn't stop. Her phone rang. The hospital. Her father. Another seizure. Stable, but barely. Time was running out. For her father's health, for her own survival, for the life she'd been trying to resurrect. Maybe it was time to stop surviving and start living, even if it cost everything. Mount Sinai's ICU hummed with the particular rhythm of bodies fighting to stay alive. Thomas Bennett lay in a bed that cost more per night than Sarah had ever earned in a week, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped their mechanical prayers. The seizure had triggered complications, cascading failures his traumatized nervous system couldn't withstand anymore. Dr. Okonkwo delivered the verdict with clinical gentleness. He needs surgery. It's risky, but without it, the next seizure will likely be catastrophic. The procedure isn't covered by insurance. Cost, $200,000. You have 2 weeks to decide. After that, the risks compound exponentially. Sarah did the math in the hospital chapel. A small room with synthetic stained glass and the ghost of other people's prayers. Even with her Valmont salary, she was $150,000 short. 2 weeks, 14 days, 336 hours. The chapel door opened. Harrison Sterling entered carrying white lilies, the funeral kind, dressed in a camel coat that probably cost what the surgery did. He looked almost contrite, which made him more dangerous. I heard about your father. I'm sorry. Sarah's voice was permafrost. What do you want? Harrison sat 2 pews away, respecting distance like a predator respecting territory. I'll pay for the surgery, all of it, plus I'll drop the board seat at Valmont. You keep your job, your reputation, everything. The offer hung between them like poison disguised as medicine. What's the price? Sarah asked. You resign from Valmont, disappear back into whatever life you had before, and you sign an NDA stating that nothing happened at Lorony, that you lied about speaking French, that you fabricated your credentials to gain sympathy and employment. He stood, leaving the lilies on the pew. Your father has 2 weeks. After that, the surgery becomes too risky. Choose his life or your pride. He walked out. The lilies stayed, their scent cloying and premature. Sarah sat in that chapel for 2 hours. She thought about her father, who'd taught her that integrity was the only inheritance worth leaving. She thought about 3 years of sacrifice that would be erased with a signature. She thought about Marcus, about every student who needed proof the system could be just. She thought about Adrian's email. You're writing your way out, just like Christine de Pizan. And she understood. Her father's greatest fear wasn't dying. It was watching her die inside. She'd been dead for 3 years, a ghost in a uniform. Harrison's offer would make that death permanent. She called Lucian. I need you to trust me. 48 hours and complete autonomy. What do you need? your lawyers, your media contacts, and auditing records for all board donations in the past 5 years. Lucien didn't hesitate. Done. But while Sarah built her case, Harrison made his final move. He contacted Mount Sinai's billing department, posing as Sarah's financial power of attorney. A complete lie. He canceled Thomas Bennett's surgery, claiming the family had decided against treatment. By the time Sarah discovered it, the surgical team had been reassigned. Her father's slot, gone. Next availability, 3 months, too late. The rage that detonated in Sarah's chest was archaeological, built from 3 years of compressed humiliation and fear. She didn't call, she didn't email, she went to war. Sterling Dynamics occupied the 76th floor of One World Trade Center, all glass and arrogance. Sarah bypassed security with the fury of someone beyond caring about consequences. She took the elevator with a dozen confused executives, walked past Harrison's assistant like she owned the building. Harrison looked up from his desk, shock flickering across his face. Sarah slapped a folder down. You crossed a line. I was going to expose your fraud quietly. Corporate channels, legal processes. Now, I'm going to burn your empire down in public view. Harrison's mask cracked. You can't touch me. I have lawyers, money, power. Sarah leaned across his mahogany desk. You have debt, fraudulent shell companies, and a pattern of abusing vulnerable people documented across 7 years. I have witnesses, evidence, and journalists who dream about stories like this. You wanted to humiliate me for speaking French? I'm going to humiliate you in every language spoken on Wall Street. If you do this, Harrison's voice dropped to threat level, I'll destroy your father. I'll blacklist him from every hospital in New York. Sarah didn't flinch. You already tried to kill him. You failed, because here's what you don't understand. I've been surviving your kind of cruelty for 3 years. You're not the first powerful man who tried to break me. You're not even the scariest. Try your worst. I'm done being afraid. She walked out, her hands shaking so violently in the elevator she could barely press the button. On the street, her phone rang. Adrian. I'm at JFK. I landed early. My father told me everything. Where are you? Sarah's voice cracked. I'm in the middle of destroying a man's life. Pause. Then, good. He deserves it. Tell me where to meet you. The cafe near Columbia smelled like old books and new possibilities. Sarah arrived first, choosing a corner table where her back could face the wall. 3 years of survival instincts didn't evaporate overnight. Then Adrian Valmont walked through the door, and 3 years vanished like they'd never existed. He was older, weathered in ways that academic life carved into idealists who cared too much. But his eyes held the same warmth she remembered from that Sorbonne symposium when he'd called her work alive. And she'd blushed like a graduate student, half her competence. You disappeared, he said softly, sliding into the seat across from her. I had to. I looked for you. No, your father told me. They sat in the loaded silence of people who'd traveled different continents to arrive at the same moment. Sarah told him everything. The stroke, the jobs, the humiliation, Harrison's escalating cruelty. Adrian listened the way scholars listen, completely cataloging every detail. When she finished, he reached across the table and took her hand. You're the bravest person I know. Sarah laughed bitterly. I'm terrified. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, it's action despite it. You taught me that. He paused. Your thesis on Christine de Pizan. You wrote. She wrote her way out of silence, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she knew silence would kill her faster than speaking. I've quoted that in lecture halls for 3 years. Adrian brought her to the Valmont Foundation. Lucien had transformed the main conference room into a war room. Evidence spread across tables like battle. Maps, screens displaying financial records. A team assembled with military precision. Margaret Torres, Lucien's head lawyer, 55, ruthless, with a reputation for destroying corporate fraud cases. James Coe, former New York Times investigative journalist turned media strategist. Veronica Ashford with her cache of evidence. Chen Wei providing technical expertise. Margaret reviewed Sarah's research with the efficiency of a surgeon examining organs. This is good, really good. Fraud, harassment, false accusations across 7 incidents. But we need something more. Something that shows a pattern and intent at a personal level. Sarah remembered the stolen registry. What if Harrison didn't just want to hurt Lucien? What if he took the Valmont records to research my background? Chen accessed security logs. The break-in was sophisticated. The intruder had also accessed HR files, Sarah's employee file, including her emergency contact, Thomas Bennett, with his hospital and room number listed. He was planning something. Sarah realized, ice flooding her veins. The surgery cancellation wasn't impulsive rage. He researched exactly how to hurt me most. James Coe projected emails onto the screen, surveillance he'd been running on Harrison. He's been coordinating with Hartwick Foundation to poach Valmont's board members. Hostile takeover attempt. His plan? Force Lucien out, install himself as chair, fire Sarah publicly as his first act of ethical oversight. Lucien stared at the evidence. He's trying to destroy everything I've built. Because of wounded pride? Margaret corrected him. Because Sarah won, and men like Harrison Sterling cannot tolerate losing to people they consider beneath them. She laid out the strategy. We go public December 24th, Christmas Eve. Slow news cycle. This story will dominate. Simultaneous release. SEC complain about shell companies. NYPD documentation of harassment. Press release to major outlets. The narrative? Billionaire's fraud exposed by woman he tried to silence. Sarah hesitated. This will ruin him. Everyone looked at her. Lucien spoke first. Do you feel sorry for him? Sarah thought about her father, about Marcus, about Veronica's sister, about 7 other victims. No, I feel sorry for who he could have been. If someone had stopped him earlier. Adrian squeezed her hand. You're not ruining him, Sarah. You're stopping him. There's a difference. That night, Sarah visited her father. His condition had stabilized in the fragile way that meant anything could still tip either direction. She held his hand. Dad, I'm about to do something that might make things harder before they get better. But I have to. Thomas nodded. With immense effort, he wrote on his communication board, Proud. Adrian walked her home through December cold that turned breath to ghosts. On her stoop, he stopped. I need to tell you something. When you disappeared 3 years ago, I didn't just look academically. I asked my father to hire investigators. I wanted to make sure you were okay. But you'd covered your tracks too well. Sarah was shocked. Why? Because that conversation we had about footnotes containing poetry changed how I see the world. I wanted to thank you, but more than that. He trailed off, his hand brushing her cheek. I wanted to see if the woman who saw beauty in forgotten texts might see something beautiful in me too. They stood in the cold December night, breath fogging between them. The moment stretched like manuscript parchment, delicate, ancient, precious. Adrian's hand cupped her face. Sarah's heart was a war drum. The space between them narrowed to nothing, and her phone rang. The hospital. Sarah answered, her face draining of color. I'll be right there. She looked at Adrian. My father. Complications. They ran. At Mount Sinai, a doctor Sarah didn't recognize stood in Thomas's room. Distinguished, 60, with the bearing of someone who'd performed miracles so often they'd become routine. Dr. Raymond Chen, head of neurosurgery. Mr. Valmont called me personally. I've reviewed your father's case. The surgery he needs, I can do it tomorrow morning. Mr. Valmont has agreed to cover all costs. Sarah turned. Lucien stood in the hallway with Adrienne, his expression gentle as starlight. Your father shouldn't suffer because of Harrison Sterling's cruelty. The surgery is scheduled for 6 a.m. Focus on him. We'll handle Harrison. Sarah couldn't speak. 3 years of carrying the weight alone. And suddenly, Adrian stepped beside her, his hand finding hers. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Thomas Bennett woke from surgery at 11:47 a.m., groggy but alive. The procedure had taken 6 hours. Dr. Chen removing scar tissue that had been strangling neural pathways, rebuilding what stroke had destroyed. Sarah sat beside him, holding his hand while machines beeped their mechanical hosannas. Went. Okay. Thomas managed, his speech already clearer than it had been in months. Sarah kissed his forehead. You're going to be fine, Dad. And in the waiting room, the television played holiday programming, baking competitions, and claymation reindeer. In 90 minutes, that would change. 10 a.m., the first domino fell. The Securities and Exchange Commission announced an investigation into Sterling Dynamics for financial irregularities and potential fraud involving shell companies and asset concealment. Within minutes, Sterling's publicly traded stock collapsed. 34% loss before trading was halted. CNBC scrambled correspondence. Bloomberg sent alerts. The business world smelled blood. 10:15 a.m., the second domino. The New York Times published their expose. Pattern of abuse. How tech billionaire Harrison Sterling weaponized wealth against service workers. The article was devastating. 7 victims, including Veronica's sister, each story identical. Humiliate, accuse, destroy. Security footage from Lorne showed Harrison dropping his own credit card, then pointing at Sarah with theatrical accusation. Gerard's interview was damning. I've felt guilty for 3 months. I should have defended her immediately. But men like Mr. Sterling make cowardice profitable. 10:30 a.m., the third domino. Manhattan District Attorney's Office announced they were reviewing harassment and stalking charges. The photo Harrison sent, Sarah's father being watched, was Exhibit A. This represents a pattern of intimidation targeting vulnerable populations, the DA said in a press conference. Wealth does not exempt anyone from the law. Harrison's response was spectacular self-destruction. His PR team released a boilerplate denial, but Harrison himself went on Twitter. His thread was unhinged, calling Sarah a gold-digging academic fraud, claiming the Valmonts orchestrated a hit job, threatening lawsuits against everyone, including the Times. His board of directors watched in horror from Sterling Dynamics' conference room. By 11 a.m., they'd called an emergency meeting. Catherine Thornton, his lead investor, spoke first. Harrison, this isn't bad press. This is extinction level. The SEC investigation makes us toxic. Every partner is pulling out. You need to resign. Today. Harrison refused. I built this company. Catherine's smile was surgical. No, your grandfather built Sterling Industries. You inherited it, rebranded it, and drove it into bankruptcy. Motion to remove Harrison Sterling as CEO. All in favor. Every hand rose except Harrison's. James Coe monitored coverage from Valmont Foundation, screens showing the global cascade. CNN's running it. BBC. Forbes has a profile on Sarah, the scholar who fought back. This is everywhere. Whereas Lucien watched the news cycle devour Harrison Sterling. How's Sarah? Chen, texting from the hospital. Focused on her father. Doesn't even know she's a hero yet. Harrison left his own building via service elevator, avoiding cameras that had multiplied like vultures. His phone rang constantly. Lawyers, former friends, journalists, scenting scandal. He ignored everything. He drove to Lorny, the restaurant where this had started. He demanded a table. The new maitre d', Gerard had been promoted to general manager, approached with professional courtesy that couldn't hide pity. Mr. Sterling, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Do you know who I am? The maitre d's expression was genuinely sympathetic. Yes, sir. That's exactly why I'm asking you to leave. Harrison sat in his car outside, watching through the window as people dined, laughed, lived. He was invisible now, powerless. His phone buzzed, a news alert. Sterling Dynamics files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Everything his grandfather built. Gone. Because he couldn't resist humiliating a waitress. At Mount Sinai, Sarah's phone exploded with notifications. Chen showed her the news. You did it. He's done. Sarah felt empty. I spent 3 years being angry. Now that it's over, I don't know what to feel. Adrian noticed. What's wrong? I expected triumph. Instead, I just feel tired. Feel relief, Adrian said. Feel proud. Feel ready to move forward. Lucien arrived with a box containing the Christine de Pizan manuscript. Thought you might want to finish your analysis. I've arranged publication in the Journal of Medieval Studies. Your name, your research, no more hiding. Sarah read the line that had sustained her. Celle qui se cache dans l'ombre n'est pas moins lumineuse. Thomas, still weak but present, wrote on his board, You shine. Sarah's phone rang, unknown number. Against instinct, she answered. Harrison's voice was broken. I wanted to say, you were right, about everything. Long pause. My grandfather said I'd destroy what he built. I did, but I thought it would be the business. I didn't realize it would be me. Sarah had a choice. Cruelty or mercy. She chose truth. Mr. Sterling, you didn't destroy yourself because of me. You destroyed yourself because you never valued anything real. Money, cruelty, power, none of that lasts. But knowledge, kindness, courage, those are forever. I hope you learn that before it's too late. She hung up. That evening, Sarah stood on the hospital roof. She needed air, perspective, distance from the wreckage of Harrison Sterling's empire. Adrian found her. How did you know I'd be here? He smiled. When the world becomes too much, scholars seek height. We like perspective. They stood together, looking at the city glittering with Christmas lights and snow and infinite possibilities. What happens now? Adrian asked. Sarah turned to him. I finish my father's recovery, complete the manuscript project, and then, she paused, then maybe I stop running from the life I was supposed to have. And what life is that? One where I don't have to choose between being brilliant and being human, where I can be both. Adrian's hand found hers. The city sprawled below them, cold and beautiful and full of second chances. For the first time in 3 years, Sarah felt like she belonged to the beauty, not just the survival. Spring arrived in New York like a promise kept. Tentative at first, then undeniable. The Valmont Foundation archive at 3 p.m. was awash in natural light, dust motes dancing like microscopic galaxies through air that smelled of old parchment and new coffee. Sarah Elizabeth Bennett stood among the manuscripts, no longer in survival mode. Her posture had changed, relaxed but purposeful, the bearing of someone who'd stopped apologizing for occupying space. She annotated the Christine de Pizan manuscript with confident strokes, a real cappuccino beside her, not hospital vending machine sludge, and a photograph on her desk. Thomas Bennett, smiling and healthy, teaching his online course for stroke survivors. Her father had regained 60% of his speech. He could now speak in full sentences, though slowly, carefully, like someone relearning their native language. He'd published a paper, co-authored with Sarah, on linguistic recovery after neurological trauma. His joy was radiant, infectious, proof that resurrection was possible if you fought hard enough. The door opened. Sarah didn't hear it at first, too absorbed in translating a particularly complex passage about women's economic resilience in medieval France. "You're still reading in natural light." Adrian's voice. Sarah turned, and her smile was instant. Unguarded, the smile of someone who'd stopped being afraid of happiness. "You're early. I thought your lecture wasn't until 5. I may have lied. Adrian crossed the archive with the easy grace of someone who belonged in libraries. "I finished an hour ago, but I wanted to watch you work. You're different here." "Different how?" "Content. Like you've finally come home to yourself." They sat in the reading room surrounded by centuries of preserved thought, the accumulated wisdom of people who'd fought their own battles against silence and erasure. "Remember that conversation at the Sorbonne?" Adrian asked. "About footnotes?" Sarah laughed. "You bring that up constantly. Because it's important. You said, the most profound truths are hidden in places people don't think to look. I didn't understand then that you were talking about yourself." Sarah was quiet. "I wasn't trying to hide." No, you were trying to survive. There's a difference." He leaned forward. "But you don't have to survive anymore, Sarah. You can live." Sarah showed him her completed translation, Christine de Pizan's lost treatise, breathtaking in its relevance across 7 centuries. The final line read, "They called me lesser because I had less gold, but I possessed the greater treasure, the fortress of my mind, which no man could siege, no poverty could diminish, no cruelty could conquer. And this will change medieval scholarship," Adrian said, awe in his voice. "I'm not publishing alone." Sarah showed him the title page, translated and annotated by Dr. Sarah Elizabeth Bennett and Dr. Thomas Bennett. "My father and I worked on it together. Through his recovery, it gave him purpose. It gave me my father back, not the man before the stroke, but someone new, someone who understands what it means to rebuild." Adrian took her hands. "I need to tell you something. For 3 years I thought about you. Not obsessively. I had a life, work, relationships that didn't work out, but you were always there. The woman who saw poetry in decay. I told myself it was scholarly admiration." He paused. "I was lying to myself." Sarah's heart was a timpani. "What was it really?" "Hope. I hoped you'd come back. I hoped I'd get another chance to know you. I hoped that maybe you'd see me the way I saw you, as someone who understands that the most beautiful things in life are the ones we fight to preserve." Sarah didn't answer immediately. She picked up a manuscript, one of the first texts she'd restored at Valmont. "When I came here 6 months ago, I was terrified. Not of Harrison, not of failure, but of hope, because hope meant I might have something to lose again, and I'd lost so much." She looked at him. "But you know what I learned? Living in fear of loss isn't living. It's just a slower kind of dying." And the kiss was gentle, a hand on a cheek, a lean forward, a meeting in the space between 2 people who'd spent years in exile finding their way home. When they pulled back, Sarah was crying. "I'm not fixed, Adrian. I'm still healing. My father will never be who he was. I still have nightmares." Adrian brushed away her tears. "I don't want fixed. Fixed is for objects. You're a person. Persons are messy and complicated and glorious. That's what I love about you." 6 months later. September. The Valmont Foundation Gala celebrated the launch of the Bennett Chen Fellowship and publication of Sarah's Christine de Pizan translation. Sarah stood at a podium wearing a dress Adrian helped her choose, looking at the audience, her father in the front row, beaming. Marcus beside him, Chenwei, Lucian, Veronica Ashford, now a foundation board member. Dozens of scholars and students whose lives would be changed by what happened here tonight. Sarah began. "For 3 years I was invisible. Not because the world couldn't see me, but because I'd learned to make myself small, to survive. But survival is not the same as living. Living requires risk. Living requires showing the world who you really are, and trusting that some people will value what they see." She talked about her father's stroke, her time at Loranie, the humiliation, the man who tried to destroy her. "Harrison Sterling taught me something important. Cruelty is the language of empty souls, but kindness is the language of empires. Lucien Valmont saw me at my lowest and offered me a kingdom, not of money or power, but of books and purpose and a chance to remember who I was." And she concluded, "This fellowship exists for every person who's been told they don't belong in the halls of knowledge. Every person who's been humiliated for being brilliant while broke. Every person who's hidden their light because the world prefers them dim. You belong here. Your minds are treasures. And if anyone ever tells you otherwise, remember, she who hides in shadow is no less radiant." The room erupted in standing ovation. Thomas Bennett stood, with effort, but he stood, tears streaming. Marcus sobbed. Even Lucian dabbed his eyes. That night, Sarah and Adrian walked through Central Park. The same park she'd once crossed at dawn, exhausted and dreading another day, now transformed. Not the park, but her relationship to it. What are you thinking? Adrian asked. About billionaire hearts. What about them? A real billionaire heart isn't about money. It's about what you value. Harrison valued dominance. He died inside long before his empire fell. But Lucien, he values people, knowledge, second chances. That's a billionaire heart, richness measured in lives changed, not dollars accumulated. They walked into the night, hand in hand, two scholars who'd found poetry in each other's footnotes. They say money talks. But here's the truth most people miss. Money doesn't talk. It screams. It screams insecurity. It screams fear. It screams the desperate need to prove something that can't be proven with dollars. But there's another sound, quieter, but infinitely more powerful. The sound of a woman reclaiming her voice after 3 years of silence. The sound of a father relearning to speak, one word at a time. The sound of a student daring to dream when the system said quit. The sound of strangers becoming allies because cruelty, finally, became too expensive to tolerate. That sound, that's the real currency of a billionaire heart. Because here's what Harrison Sterling never understood. Wealth without character is just decorated poverty. A man can own towers that touch clouds and still be spiritually bankrupt. He can dine in restaurants that import chandeliers from Versailles and still be starving for something real. But character without wealth? That's a kingdom no creditor can seize, no stock market can crash, no bankruptcy can dissolve. Sarah Bennett was poor in dollars, but rich in the things that actually compound: courage, knowledge, integrity. And when the final accounting came, when both she and Harrison stood before the universe's ledger, only one of them had invested in assets that appreciate forever. So, here's the question, worth more than any fortune. What are you building? A balance sheet that impresses strangers, or a legacy that transforms them? Because the biggest currency in this world isn't what you earn. It's what you're worth when everything else is taken away. That's the real billionaire heart, the one measured in character, not capital. This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. All characters, companies, events, and scenarios depicted in rich man orders in a foreign language to humiliate her. He never expected this. Reply are entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, businesses, events, or locales is purely coincidental.